just so you understand, thank you, Jan. Jan is here with me doing all the IT support and also going to be a breakout room lead. So what we're going to do, we're going to have our very quick first round pitch, and that's really a pitch for you to decide which room you're going to go to. And I recommend you sort of go to the room. There are only two of them. That is the organization that sort of reflects you a little bit more, so that you get more of an understanding of what might be important to a funder when talking about your kind of organization. This is, of course, about network funding, so we'll all have that to talk about when we come back together. So 2 30-second pitches, go into breakout rooms. They will be recorded. I keep saying that so I remember. And then we'll have 4 minutes from our organizations that are looking for funding, and then we'll go into question and answer and response from the funders. So I will call on, for no particular reason, Shireen first, if I may. And by the way, yeah. All good.
Sorry, you
go
said
ahead.
something?
No, I was going to say you do have I just want to make sure everyone knows you can, both pitchers and funders do have host privileges, so you can share screens if you want to.
Sure. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. My name is Shireen Rizvi. I'm 29 years old, and I'm the founder and CEO of Medhavi Association. What we do at Medhavi is help young people in India pursue a career of their choice that they're passionate about and live a life that they value. If you'd like to know more about my journey in the social sector for the last 10 years and how I'm building a self-sustaining community to support young dreams, you can join my room. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Shireen. And Rachel.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Rachel from the System Sanctuary, with my co-founder Tatiana Fraser, who's also going to be joining in the breakout group. We teach and train people internationally on systems change and create peer learning groups that transform their sense of camaraderie and strengthen their leadership skills. And we're going to be sharing a vision to scale feminist system change practice and ecosystem building as a strategy to shift harmful systems and to support women's leadership for systemic change. More specifically, we want to hold up and train and bolster the capacity of about 250 women-identified leaders internationally who are already shifting dominant systems.
Fabulous. Thank you. So we're now calling on Jan to break us into rooms, and you can choose which room you prefer. And we'll start, in about 30 seconds. So
I'll just press that I remember so that we can all come back to the recording later. And so without further ado, we will start with a 4 to 5 minute pitch from Rachel to the group. So I'll keep the time for you, but if I'll probably just put the hand up if you're at the 5 minute mark, but we're quite flexible. I'm not going to be too strict with the time, but just around 5 minutes, so you see. Is that all right?
Before we start that, Jan, I'm noticing that it says there's only 3 minutes left in our breakout room session. So I think that needs to be adjusted so we all don't get kicked out of the room in a few minutes.
Thank you. We'll try to do my best to fix that as we go. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, sure.
Okay, great. So Tatiana and I are both going to be doing the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. Moving. All right. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to share our vision of scaling feminist systems change practice internationally. So to start with, this is Tatiana and I. We co-founded something called the System Sanctuary about 5 years ago. Tatiana's based in Montreal in Canada, and I'm based in the US. I'm originally from the UK. Our background before we joined forces is that we have both built and scaled our own networks and ecosystems in our own countries. So we have significant experience building ecosystems for positive change in different contexts. So mine was, I co-founded something called the Finance Innovation Lab in the UK. That was kind of, I think, one of the pioneering efforts at building innovation labs, and has been used as a case study at Yale and Harvard and different places subsequently. Was a partnership between WWF and the Institute of Chartered Accountants. And I co-led it for about 8 years. Tatiana co-founded something called Girls Action Foundation, which used intersectional feminist frameworks and strategy around building a network to support girls and young women, and scaled it nationally. And she is a Shaker Fellow, which she rarely tells anyone, but I'm proud of her. So I will share with you. Our work today is we do 3 things. We have a masterclass where we teach systems practice internationally to small cohorts of leaders. And we partner to create peer learning groups for people who work in social and environmental change and want to build spaces for learning about their practice around systemic change as they go. And the third thing that we do is that we co-founded and co-lead and co-support, actually, I should say, something called Illuminate, which is building the field of system change practice internationally. So we're very involved in kind of field building around systemic change and kind of looking at the meta view of how the field is emerging and evolving. So we've been researching feminist system change practice for about 7 years. We've been hosting these masterclasses virtually, and we've had about 250 people globally go through our programs. We've also piloted the support of ecosystem projects working on issues specifically around gender, particularly on gender-based violence and climate and nature. And we're known as thought leaders in the field of system change around feminist systems change, building ecosystems and field building. I wanted to share this slide, which is some of the people that we through our programs. So, you know, we're really not just kind of banging out a lot of training programs. These are our humans that we've been through an 8-month process with, and there are many more of these faces. These are the women that participated in our systems sisterhood for women systems leaders that we ran for 2.5 years. And it has a big impact on the people that are working with. They say things like, you know, it's hard to picture the last year without this group. We have partners that we work with, including the Turtle Island Institute, which is leading Indigenous systems change in Canada, Shoka, Make Way, others. And importantly, and I think for this pitch, we have also started to inspire other people to create their own peer learning groups around issues. So they participate in our programs and then they go off and start their own peer learning groups that lead to all sorts of projects. And here's a few of them. As an example. Our vision, as I said at the start, is to scale feminist system change practice and ecosystem building as a strategy to shift harmful systems. We see that the tools and methodologies can be really helpful, and we still have learning to do, which is where the peer learning part comes in. And particularly, we're really committed to supporting women's leadership, so women who are doing amazing work already, leading systemic change against many barriers system. I'll pass over to Tatiana, if that's okay, to lead us through background to the problem.
Great, thanks. So as Rachel said, we've been working, kind of weaving together feminist social change and also systems change. And we know clearly that gender inequities are persistent issues, from feminized poverty, gender-based violence. We see these intersections on the SDG priorities, number 5. We also know that the field is siloed, it's underfunded, and it's not centered in systems change work. And often gender issues lack support, and they're often in crisis mode due to this kind of lack of funding and resources. And so our solution, and to the next slide, thanks. Okay, so we also see that there's a lack of support for women systems leaders. So we know that women are at the forefront of leading systems change, and they often face kind of specific discriminatory barriers like access to funding and other supports. And we also know that the systems change field lacks overall a power analysis that feminist practice brings forward and supports. Thanks. Next slide. So our solution and what we're proposing here, based on all the work that we've done, which is, we've piloted and trained and developed, is to scale feminist systems change practice through building a platform for training on feminist systems change, which is rooted in the work we've done through our masterclass, building foundational kind of an understanding of complexity theory and systems change, and all the capacities for leadership in systems work, plus peer learning cohorts, which we think is essential across ecosystems to help move systems, and then emerge strategies for systems change. And more specifically, we're looking to work with women-identified people and organizations who are leading ecosystem projects that work on gender issues, like gender-based violence, but also other issues like climate change, child poverty, and beyond. And so through training, we would also form cohorts of peer learning across ecosystems to support advancing the work. And in terms of the solution, we imagine that this impact, one, we would be reframing issues. We would be creating shared and leveraged resources. We would be supporting stronger strategies for systems change, deepening relationships, shifting power and resources from dominant systems to the margins, where we know innovative ideas and perspectives come from. And so the outcomes of our solution is that we would support 20 ecosystem learning and collaborations that are looking to shift gender issues and other issues as well. And we would be supporting 400 women leaders and supporting to strengthen their capacities for systems change. And we would see strengthened ecosystems, more collaboration, reduce silos between gender field and the broader systems change field or change field. And our ask very clearly is one, partnerships. We're seeking partners, and we're also seeking funding. One, to develop an online training platform that would include content videos and just a beautiful space for people to come to. Two, to really spend time in partnership development and promotion so that we can build partners with ecosystem leaders and with funding partners as well. And then also to train and pay a team of facilitators to help us do this work. And we would continue this work as entrepreneurs in the field as well. So the impact would continue after this investment. And there you go. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Rachel and Tatiana. I'm sorry for the stress factor of the clock, but the time is fixed. We're here, and now I will pass over to Shireen. And basically, you now have about 10-15 minutes to ask any follow-up clarification questions, anything that you would like to hear Rachel and Tatiana elaborate on. So the floor is yours, Shireen.
It's for all the participants, right, to ask questions and seek clarification?
Yeah, let's start with you, but we're in a small enough crowd that indeed, if Lucia and Al Hassan want to ask as well, please feel free. But the floor is yours, Shireen.
Oh, thank you. One initial question I have is, I thought the slide that was quite helpful to hear a little bit about your current work, the types of training and peer learning that you do. What gave you the idea for needing to do this particular project? Was it something that emerged from your current work or a gap that you were seeing? I'm just curious, why this specific investment?
I'll kick us off with that. I think Rachel and I come from the world of doing and practice as we spoke, and coming from from a feminist intersectional practice and organization and building. When Rachel and I met, two things kind of happened. One, we both saw the gap and the need for peer learning spaces, because we know as doers, we don't have this figured out. And we know that through peer learning, we can emerge in a collective intelligence to help inform how to do this work and to move forward. And at the same time, so that informs our kind of peer learning methodology. And we both shared this vision. It was really wonderful to meet together. But at the same time, I think we've had an agenda as systems leaders to bridge the field of feminist feminist gender specific issues and the field of systems change, because there was such, and because they're so aligned, they're both working to shift harmful, violent systems to new ways of being, collaborating, and balance. And they complement each other. Like what we can bring in from feminist practice, addressing power issues and inequities and systems of oppression, woven with systems change, and knowing that systems practice can serve the feminist field, and that there's a lot of really important work that needs to be done, knowing that gender is siloed. So we have an agenda, and it's just to say it's been years in the making to get to a place where we can say we can scale this. We've done a lot of research, development, and commitment and passion.
I have, maybe another 1 or 2 questions, but I'd actually welcome questions from others in the room too. Please go ahead if you have any.
I can go. I do have a comment and a question, and then I also have multiple questions, so maybe we can take turns. So thank you so much, Rachel and Tatiana, for the presentation, and also peer learning. That's very feminist. It just changes the structure. You have this one person, usually a man, who's teaching you something, whereas we're building knowledge together. So yeah, and my question goes to, how do you see this effect multiplying? You talk about the people that you've worked and you've trained, but what are some of the, I just want to be very careful with this word, result or indicators that you're seeing that's actually like generating the systematic change? And I absolutely understand that this is a change of years and maybe generations, but there's something maybe that's palpitating there that you would like to point out.
I think one of the things that stands out to me to ask that question is, like, when you're leading a system change project, the 2 emotions that are most commonly expressed on our programs is like overwhelm, sometimes close to burnout, and loneliness. So people who are attracted to our programs are often feeling those 2 things, that their project has become successful, and as a result, it's become massive. And they find a place to be real about the specific issue that's keeping them up at night that week. And that's the way we host and facilitate our sessions. And so what it does, I think, is it creates the conditions where people stay in their jobs, they stay doing the work, because otherwise what happens is, and we've seen this in other programs that we've run, is, people do hit the wall and they do step out. And they do say, I can't do this anymore because it's affecting my entire life. And so I feel like they're the kind of people that we love to work with, are the people that are really doing the work and are sticking with it in ways that are manageable and also drawing boundaries. And I think that's one of the biggest impacts we have.
And I can just add in this initiative, in terms of scale, like what Rachel's speaking about is the culture that we create, which helps leaders kind of influence the culture from really where it's a toxic kind of patriarchal, white supremacist kind of cultures that are, with the conditions that people are working in, to shift those cultures while they're doing the change work that they're doing. But the other piece is also about very intentionally shifting resources from kind of dominant centers to the margins to support that leadership. So there's a power shifting of resources that I think we will also be able to impact on a large scale as well.
Thanks, Lucia. Shireen, please go ahead.
I guess I have a somewhat basic question, which is, what is feminist systems change? How do you define it? And how is that different from sort of more general systems change work?
So I'll keep this really brief. But Rachel and I, when we're working, we have identified capacities for systems change. And in the alignment, as I spoke about earlier, between feminist kind of agenda and systems agenda, we see that there's gaps in the systems field, which really are about addressing power. And so in our capacities, the feminist practices that we kind of weave in are about centering lived experience and starting from lived experience, shifting power, as I mentioned, and bringing a power lens to the work, centering care and healing in the practice as well. And building the conditions to work across difference with intention and with skill. And then on the other side, like we in the systems capacities that also resonate with, but also complement what's missing in kind of feminist spaces, are working at multiple levels and being very strategic about that, leveraging all the beautiful kind of mapping tools that help us do collective sense making as an ecosystem that come through the systems change field, and really building practice for adapting and emergence and learning into the space as well. So these are ways that we identify capacities and kind of weave them into a feminist systems change, and feel like in sharing this, it is a unique offering, and it's actually resonates and is picking up a lot of traction, which we find really exciting. Rachel, did you want to add anything to that?
We've got a framework, and I've dropped a blog in the chat if you want to find it.
That's great. And I have the sense that the audience for this work is global. So just wanted to confirm that. And then sort of practically then, what does that mean for you all in terms of multiple time zones, languages, cultural competency? How are you thinking about that?
So we've had this idea in mind for some time. We've had a lot of people go through our programs that are based in different parts of the world. And so our idea is that we will support and work with facilitators in regions that have become very close colleagues, and we've worked with on other projects, who are based in India, based in South Africa, based in, and we will go to places based on where existing relationships exist and we have trust, and they have been through our program and taken what they want from it and use it in their own culture.
And one of the things Rachel and I always say is, like, in terms of scaling, this is definitely not a top-down approach. So it's really connecting what exists and where folks are, and leveraging like what we can offer, and the connectivity across those ecosystems as well. So yeah.
I welcome questions from Nuhu, if that's right, or Lucia, if you, and how much more time do we have left?
I was going to say we have about 6 minutes left. So if also at this point, if anyone would want to offer reflections and comments as well, in addition to questions, we can slightly start shifting to the feedback as well.
And then is there and then there's a separate time for feedback as well, or that's
then we will come together with the other group as well, and then we will kind of reflect also on their experiences and maybe kind of weave together what are some of the general comments. So
great. So maybe we'll just take one more question if someone has one, and then we can move to feedback.
I don't know if Nuhu has a question and he wants to go, or if not, I do have a question.
Can I just say one more thing just to your last point, your last question? I think it's really important. One of the things that we do in our work, all of our work is about really being aware of the fact that the systems field has emerged in a Western context, very academic, white, and male-led kind of space, and lots of people are doing systems change and they don't call it that. And so in the idea of our approach to training, and it's to recognize that, and for people to see their practice in what was called systems change, but also to recognize that people bring different lineages, et cetera. So we would be very strategic about the scaling, as aware of conscious of dynamics between North and South, and in a very feminist intersectional kind of way. So I just wanted to deepen that a little bit, and happy to pass it on again.
Thank you, Tatiana. It also kind of relates to my question is, where do you find the women you're working with, right? Where's your audience? How do you find them? How do you connect with them?
They find us. That's how it's worked so far. Yeah, just through our network and colleagues of colleagues and people telling other people, which is why we need some help with scale, because we have limits to our network, and we are very aware that neither of us, for example, grew up in the kind of US big philanthropic NGO world, and we don't have those networks. And so I do think that there are other people in the players in the kind of world who do. And so, yeah, that's kind of one of the things we're trying to shift.
Well, I'm happy to move to feedback because I'm conscious of time. Sorry, I thought we had two separate pieces for the Q&A and for feedback. So first of all, just like this is a beautiful program. It's really exciting and something that I think those of us who identify as feminists really see a need for. I really appreciated sort of understanding more about your background and sort of how you both came together and the experience that you bring to this type of program. And I think your budget is like extremely reasonable. So one question, is just around, is that really what it will cost? And I like questions that came to my mind were, well, if you're doing in-person programming in different countries, like just travel and facilitation costs alone, I feel like would, push you over this budget. So, we didn't have time to get into the budget, but that was a question that I had just in terms of, is that enough actually? I think my feedback is really kind of connected to the questions that I asked. So I think oftentimes we assume that funders know the lingo of our field, and I did, right? I know what systems change is. I could imagine what a feminist systems change might be, but one thought I had, since you were doing PowerPoints, is maybe having a slide that has like, what is feminist theory and what systems change, and what's that kind of Venn diagram of where your approach merges the best of those pieces and kind of offers us a different way to approach this. Another idea that I had is I loved the photographs of the women that you shared. And I thought, wouldn't it have been interesting to hear about the path of one of them, to really understand concretely, what does it look like to do feminist systems change? Like, what's the training that you offered? And then what did one of these women do with it? To give us a real concrete sense of the impact question that I think Lucia was asking about, which is, if one was to apply a feminist systems change lens, what do we actually see that is different? Because then in a way that speaks to like the multiplier impact that this training will have. So those were a couple of thoughts that I had in terms of, ways to just have really made this a bit more concrete for people to understand the impact.
Super helpful, thank you. Yeah, we just really welcome any feedback because we haven't actually shared this with anybody yet, so very open.
Thanks, Rachel. Lucia, I think you had a comment. If you would like to, please.
Yeah, for sure. A couple of comments. I mean, I know that PowerPoint presentations are very useful, but sometimes they are also very distracting because you're trying to read instead of listening to the person that's talking to you. So I often find that, yeah, that it's better when people or entrepreneurs are teaching, that they'll just like lead with a story first and then like draw the audience towards the PowerPoint presentation or the presentation that they have. I also like it stayed in my head, the peer learning is a very feminist practice as well. I think that you can use that as part of your narrative to elevate what you are actually doing, because you're not just saying we are doing feminist systematic change, you're actually doing it. So I think that will be a stronghold. And yeah, I think that's something that for me was missing a little bit, was the fact of understanding who are the women that you're working with, like what are their demographics, where do they came from, what type of work are they doing? Because I agree with Shireen, I think that will be helpful in order to connect what's the actual impact that you're actually having.
Great, thank you very much. Very good.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Lucia, and we will continue this in the main room as well. We'll continue the discussion with the other group as well. So if there's also something you want to share in the chat for Rachel and for Tatiana, please feel free to do that. And so I'll see you in the big room and we'll continue the conversation. So thank you so much for all of your comments and your engagement. And yeah, well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
The 1 minute, we got our 1 minute warning, 1 minute after I thought we would. So we're early. Good for us. So I was also, I thought one of your questions, Joe, was super interesting, which was, bringing out how the network is powerful for, like talking about how the, being able to get into Microsoft or Lenovo or whatever is a result of what you're doing in and of itself. Very compelling. Welcome back, everybody. We're now into our panel discussion setup. So Jan, I don't know how well we can do this, but I'm counting on you. It is really a discussion amongst our 5 speakers. We had a fabulous conversation. I thought it was super interesting to hear what Shireen does and get Katie and Joe's comments on it. So I think maybe we'll just do a 2-minute maybe report out from each room so people know what they heard. And I think I will ask our funders perhaps if they would speak to kind of what they heard and maybe get the conversation going that way. I'm going to ask Shireen from the Ford Foundation if you could go first, because I didn't hear your session, and then Katie and or Joe maybe can talk about the other side.
Sure, I'll try and give the project its justice. It's a just showing. But essentially, we heard about a really amazing program that would help to train women leaders around the world in feminist systems change. And the 2 practitioners who are leading this program have a deep history in doing this work and in developing new programs, and have a far reach sort of all over the world in terms of networks of women that could benefit from this. Just very briefly, some of the feedback that we shared around the presentation, they did a short PowerPoint presentation and both of them presented, which I meant to comment was also really nice to hear from both leaders of the program. We wanted to understand more concretely who the women were and what impact they were making in the world. So based on their track record of having worked with women leaders in this feminist systems change work, could they give us like a story of one of the women and how the work that she then did, impacted the society that she was a part of? And I think the other piece that we talked about is like not assuming that a funder is going to know what we mean when we say feminist systems change, that we should sort of break down or help define what some of that, lingo means that might be well understood in our fields, but not maybe widely understood. And the third point of, I think, feedback was really around the budget and if what they were asking for was really enough to scale the work that they were doing, or if they actually should look at the numbers and ask for more. So I'll stop there and welcome if you want others from our room to comment, or if we want to go and talk through what happened in the.
Yeah, I think maybe Katie, you can just give the same kind of overview from our room, and then people should ask whatever they want to ask of whomever they want to ask it.
Sure, I'll similarly try and do it justice. Yes, so Shireen presented her vision for Medhavi Association, which is a network working to support young people to pursue the careers of their choice, overcome barriers, and really be more fulfilled, I guess, within their work and their careers. Some of the feedback so Joe and I collectively gave was, I guess, partly how powerful Shireen's story and journey is in itself, and that she should describe that more, including kind of lessons over the past 10 years. Also kind of to understand more this wider system that it operates within and how that's kind of contributing to broader systems change in that way. And understanding kind of who the partners are and what systems she's complementing through that work. And then I think Joe spoke to a really interesting point around the intersectionality of the work that came through really strongly, and how to lean into that as an asset really, rather than within the kind of funding space, rather than potentially kind of that being a barrier to kind of fitting into funder, otherwise funder kind of meat boxes. I'm paraphrasing there, but yeah. Joe, anything you'd add? I feel like I didn't cover it super well, but yeah, I'll stop there.
Great, thanks. So I think the first thing I would say is, Shireen, Rachel, Tatiana, what questions would you ask the funders? Like, what do you want to know for your next step or your next pitch? And then I welcome anybody's questions of every, on either side or overall, like what are funders looking for, how to approach it. But Shireen, Rachel, and Tatiana, sort of turning it around so you can ask whatever you want to get a better insight on what you should be talking about. Shireen, you're nodding, so feel free to go ahead and ask the question.
I want to first say thank you to everybody for this opportunity. This is actually my first pitch as a founder of this association. We founded this association back in February this year. So it's a very first pitch that I'm making to any funder. So thank you so much for the feedback. I wanted to ask a challenge that I have at this point is, like I mentioned, I have worked for this community in different capacities in the past years, and this is the first time I'm having a separate association to fully focus on these issues. But we've been a small team, and there isn't a lot of, I would say, data-backed insights that we can, bring on the table at this stage. So I heard you when you said that, case studies are really helpful at this point. Talking about how that transformation change happened through these engagements and these networking. But what can we do at this point if I want to support, if I need funding for this association? And I know that being data driven and getting that, data insights is a process that we will adopt in the coming time. I know it's a big challenge at this point. So what do we do at that position?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm happy off to a thought which may not be relevant at all, but I suppose the two things are, if you've potentially from the work you've been doing, there'll be sort of evidence, maybe not the exact thing you're doing, but it sounds like it's very much sort of adjacent, and that can be really valuable as a again, part of your story. I've been working in this space, I'm bringing that expertise and that specialism, and here's the impact we've seen in this world, and here's how I think I can actually grow it or make it even more so. And I think there is sort of, again, evidence in the ecosystem which can be helpful in terms of when you're talking about the importance of these networks and the importance of sort of stable jobs. What's the evidence around the importance of stable jobs for family life, for sort of economic development, etc. I think you can take that and build that into that story of our theory of change is this matters, therefore we need to do this and this. And if you can find different bits of evidence that maybe aren't from your work, but from the space, that can help you paint that picture. But that would be just one reflection. But Shireen, I can see your hands up.
Shireen, I think they put us in different rooms so we didn't confuse people. Another thought, I appreciate that, Joe. And another thought actually is, which is a general piece of thinking for everyone is, we can ask funders for things beyond money. So one thought that I had was if you approach a funder and they're asking for evidence before they'll fund you, it might be worth saying, well, do you have an evaluator or someone that you recommend that you can, cover the cost for, so I can actually document the impact of this? My assumption is that would be a relatively smaller amount of money than you might be asking the funder for. So it might actually be easier for them to be able to do that than give you a grant. And so I would say, don't be afraid to ask for the things that you need to get you to the next level, because sometimes it's not just funding. This evidence collection and documentation could be a huge asset to you in the work that you want to do.
Katie?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think just building on both those points, I think, and Joe spoke to this in a smaller group, but I think maybe thinking through the theory of change could be an interesting kind of exercise. It could be one of those asks that Shireen was asking as well, someone to support you to develop out that theory of change. And I think it doesn't need to be necessarily complex, but I think it can help you also demonstrate that you're laying the foundations for that more robust kind of evidence-based approach moving forward as well. So I think that could be an interesting place to start too.
Great, very interesting. because we do think of funders as providing, cash. And it's good to hear that there's other opportunities. Rachel, Tatiana, what question would you ask our funder panel?
I've got one question, which is just where can we take this idea? Like, we're kind of a bit stuck on that. And I don't know, just curious, like conferences, people, networks, anywhere. I don't know.
Where can you take the idea of what you're trying to get funding for? Or
Yeah.
How do you find funders in a sense?
Yeah, then I can maybe add to that just to give a little more, Rachel, for one of the challenges, I think, because we're bridging fields of feminist change, which is highly siloed, and systems change, which is emerging and new and has a lot of potential. In terms of possible funders, where, from your perspectives in the field, like energy and senses, do you think approaching funders that are already doing gender specific work, or funders who are more systems and not in the feminist space? Where do you think the readiness might be for this? And I think seeking partners, Rachel and I kind of imagine this as a partner, even an ecosystem of itself, doing this work. And so any suggestions of like partnership or folks that would be interested in supporting this and collaborating would be really helpful.
Okay, before I call on the funders here for their insight into it, and so Nexus, joining Nexus or being part of Nexus, there are people in lots of different fields, and there's lots of opportunities to sort of cross-pollinate and partner, not just within Nexus, but when you meet people through that kind of network, you might find that that's a source of connections that could be valuable to you. But I will call on Katie, Shireen, or Joe. What are your thoughts about sort of how to find the right funder pocket for something like this? Any thoughts on that? Katie?
Yeah, I mean, my sense and observation is that a lot of funders are now thinking to systems change and wanting to understand their own role in the system as well, and kind of are exploring that more deeply. So I would almost, personally, I would lean into that and use that as an advantage really in terms of how you're able to, educate those donors and kind of bring them along on your kind of with your vision in that sense. So I think that, and I think there is also though an element that people are understanding, I don't know, I think people are appreciating kind of feminist leadership as something that's cutting across outside of just the women's movement. So I think also kind of, I guess, building relationships and community with, like-minded peers in that space. It comes to mind for me. And then I think just more kind of observation around where to find the donors. I think it's also always about kind of relationships really. I'm kind of meeting them as other actors within that system rather than as kind of just someone to pitch to. So I would approach it in that way and think about relationships and building those long-term partnerships.
I think that's also similar to what Nuhu put in the chat, right? It's sort of the start locally. You start with those and also to Katie's point, those relationships that you have, and then expand from there and let them introduce you outside of that. Shireen, please.
Yeah, thank you. Two thoughts. One, picking up a little bit on what Katie was saying, I was part of a coaching training program that offered a one-day kind of introduction to coaching for funders. So the funders who attended that training got some concrete skills, but also got introduced to the program and started thinking, oh, maybe that's something that I could fund, but they got something out of it too. So as Katie was speaking, I was thinking oh, maybe you could do a sort of intro course. What is feminist systems change? And offer it to, funders that ask them to invite others so that people can understand the concept and what the value is. So it's framed as a training rather than sort of a fundraising pitch, but they'll benefit from it and then learn about the program as well. So that's sort of one thought. And then the other piece is This is not ideal because I think the ideal is to get general support so that you can grow the program how you want. But an interim step could also be thinking about partnering with funders to offer trainings to their grantees. So we provide a lot of training to our grantee partners and sort of identify needs and create cohorts all the time. And so I think that especially if you're thinking of women's funders or feminist funders globally or in the US, I imagine this type of training offering could be really interesting to them. And so that would be like a way to build up your program and start piloting it and then hopefully scale it over the long term.
Great, thanks. So because we're almost at the end here, which I know because Jan is already putting the last items into the chat for us to encourage everybody, give some material for feedback and so on. Yes, we will post the recordings from both breakout rooms, assuming that Jan recorded his. I know we did record ours. And if you could put in the chat, we ask everybody to say either something that they learned this session, or in particular, something that you learned that's going to make you change what you do, say in the next month or the next 3 months or the next 6 months, and how you approach your work with your network, or with your funders, or as a funder, whatever it might be, so that we have, so we understand what the value of this session was for everybody, and also to help you remember, it's like making a little pledge that, here's something that I want to do, that I want to change. I think I can do it better. And I want to thank everybody. Thank you to all our panelists. Really fabulous conversation, and I learned a few things that I think will be very useful in the future. And yeah, that's basically where we are. I know it's a couple of minutes before the hour. I do that so, as I say, people have a chance to share in the chat. Feel free to unmic, say hello, say good, unmute, say hello, say goodbye. Ask for other people's email in the chat if you want to continue the conversation, and the recordings will definitely be available. Please, if you're not a member of Nexus, we encourage you to join Nexus. That's one place that all these conversations will continue over the next months and years, we hope, and form sort of a real core of how to make networks more important and more productive. So thanks again. Any questions? We're here. And otherwise, I hope to see you at another ENACT event in the next few days.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was lovely and really helpful in many ways. Take good care.
Great. Thanks, Tatiana.
Thank you, everyone. It was great, and really appreciate those who pitched, because that is a, stressful position to be in. So thank you. You all did great.
Thank you. And I hope to keep tapping this network for more feedback with my next pitch. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, thank you. Lovely to meet you all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much.